A man's desperate pleas for help are dismissed as exaggeration by an overworked doctor in a busy ER. Her quiet doubt becomes a symbol of the system's coldness and nearly costs him his life. But when the truth of who he is comes to light, the balance of power shifts in one breathtaking moment. And you won't believe how justice finds its way back inside those hospital walls. Marcus Hale pushed through the sliding doors of St. Eliza Medical Center, every step calculated and shaky. The automatic lights above hummed like they were judging how long he'd last standing. His shirt clung to him with cold sweat, his lips pale. He pressed one hand against his abdomen, the pain sharp and deep, while the other gripped his phone, thumb hovering over a contact he didn't want to call. He'd driven himself here. He didn't want sirens, flashing lights, or pity. He just wanted someone to listen. At the triage desk, Nurse Denise Carter looked up, instinctively straightening when she saw the strain in his face. "Sir, are you all right?" Marcus tried to answer, but only managed a shallow breath. "Stomach," he gasped. "Feels like it's tearing." Denise's tone shifted instantly from routine to alert. She rolled the chair back, grabbed a vitals cart, and clipped the monitor to his finger. The screen blinked with numbers that made her stomach tighten. Pulse racing, blood pressure dropping, skin clammy. "Okay, Mr. Hale, right? We're going to get you seen right away." She typed urgent into the intake field. Inside the curtain partition, Dr. Lauren Whitaker entered, tablet in hand, her shoulders squared from exhaustion. It was her 14th hour. 2 trauma cases were still in surgery. A child in Base 6 had swallowed a battery, and the administrator's messages about efficiency scores had been buzzing in her pocket since noon. She skimmed Marcus's chart and exhaled through her nose. 10 out of 10, huh? Her voice was flat, practiced, the kind that slips out when empathy gets rationed. Marcus nodded weakly. "It's getting worse." "Any allergies, past medical issues, medication use?" she asked without looking up. He hesitated, clutching his abdomen tighter. "No meds, just hurts bad. Feels like something's ripping inside." Lauren finally looked up, just for a second. She saw a middle-aged black man in business slacks, no obvious trauma, no blood. She'd seen hundreds of versions of this, pain out of proportion to presentation, vitals unstable but non-specific. Her fatigue translated into dismissal. "We'll start you on antacids, fluids, and get you in line for imaging. Might take a bit. Busy night." Marcus blinked, confused. "Antacids?" His breath caught in a spasm. "Doctor, it's not." But she was already tapping her tablet. "We'll keep an eye on you," she said, and moved toward the next curtain. She didn't touch his arm. She didn't notice how his hands trembled. From the doorway, Nurse Javier Ortiz watched the monitor flash yellow. "Dr. Whitaker," he said quietly, his heart rate's climbing fast, pressure's falling. She hesitated. "He looks bad." She exhaled, tired of the pull between instinct and protocol. "We'll reassess after the labs," she muttered. But as she left the curtain, Marcus's groan filled the space behind her. Low, raw, the sound of something inside giving way. Denise met Javier's eyes over the monitors. They both knew that tone. Lauren told herself she was being practical, that she was avoiding unnecessary tests, that this was another stress case, another patient whose pain didn't match the paperwork. She told herself all the things that made her indifference feel like professionalism. And in that small, fluorescent room, the sound of monitors kept rhythm with her choice, steady, indifferent, and just loud enough to drown out a man's plea to be heard. The clock on the monitor flickered, marking seconds that stretched like hours. Marcus Hale lay half-curled on the narrow ER bed, his breath catching in uneven bursts. Each wave of pain rolled through him like a pulse of fire under his ribs, precise, relentless, and louder than the sounds around him. He tried to count through it, to focus on something else. The hum of the lights, the shuffle of shoes outside the curtain, the muffled voice on the intercom. but the pain blurred everything into static. "Please," he whispered, not to anyone specific, but to the space itself, to the room that kept moving without him. His phone, still unlocked in his palm, glowed faintly with the message he'd typed. "At ER." 2 words to his assistant, short and calm, as if brevity could disguise the truth. Then the phone slid from his fingers and clattered softly against the rail. Beside him, Nurse Javier Ortiz adjusted the bed height and checked the monitor again. The numbers confirmed what his eyes already knew. Marcus was slipping. His skin had the pale sheen of someone losing ground. Javier's voice was steady, almost gentle. "You're not alone here," he said, as if the words themselves could hold Marcus together. He meant it. His own father had once been sent home from a different hospital with just heartburn. That memory had carved itself into him, a private ache he carried like a warning. Since then, every time he saw someone brushed aside, he felt that same sting in his chest. Tonight was no different. He turned toward the computer. "I'm pushing for a CT scan," he said quietly. Across the station, Dr. Lauren Whitaker froze with her stylus hovering above the screen. The scan queue was already stacked 40 minutes deep. She could almost hear the charge nurse's voice from earlier. "No unnecessary imaging tonight. Keep the flow." The words clung to her like static. Lauren rubbed her eyes. The spreadsheet flashed through her mind, the one that tracked every test she ordered, every minute her patients waited. Every number on it decided her quarterly review, her standing with administration, her bonus. Behind that, another voice whispered, her own, convincing her she was being rational, efficient, not heartless, just careful. She thought of the last time she'd gone with her gut and ordered scans early. The results had been clear, the patient fine, and she'd been called into a meeting about resource overuse. She could still feel the sting of that correction. She opened Marcus's file again. The labs weren't back yet. Nothing on paper screamed emergency. "He looks like 100 others," she told herself. "Pain out of proportion. No clear cause. We've been here before." Then Marcus groaned, low and broken, and the monitor's beeping sharpened into alarm. His hand gripped the rail, knuckles whitening, his body folding on itself as another surge hit. Javier didn't wait. "Stop the antacids," he said firmly, his tone leaving no room for delay. "We need imaging now." Lauren glanced up, startled by the authority in his voice. For a brief second, her instincts tried to fight their way back to the surface, the part of her that once trusted compassion more than data. But then the weight of the system settled again. The rules, the metrics, the silent judgment of the invisible spreadsheet. And yet, something about the look on Javier's face, a mixture of defiance and pleading, made her pause. For the first time that night, the background noise faded, leaving only the sound of Marcus's labored breathing and the flat, unyielding truth of it. This wasn't a routine case. This was pain that couldn't wait. The cursor blinked on the order screen, waiting for her decision. The hum of the CT scanner filled the small room, steady and cold, like the tick of a metronome counting down seconds that mattered more than anyone yet realized. Marcus lay still, his breath shallow beneath the thin hospital sheet. The technician's voice was calm, routine. "Hold your breath and release." But under that tone, even the tech felt the urgency, the unspoken sense that this wasn't routine at all. When they wheeled him back to the ER bay, the lights felt brighter, the air heavier. Javier walked beside the gurney, pushing gently, eyes on the monitor. Lauren stood waiting near the workstation, her posture tight, pretending she hadn't been pacing for the last 10 minutes. She told herself it was exhaustion, not guilt, that made her heart skip each time she heard his name called. Then came the voice down the hall, sharp, decisive, undeniable. "Free air under the diaphragm, perforated ulcer, big one." The words hit like a thunderclap. Lauren froze. Perforated. That single word stripped away every rationalization she'd built that night. No more stress, no more maybe reflux, no more charts and protocols that dulled the human truth in front of her. This wasn't anxiety. This was a man with a hole in his stomach, time slipping through it with every beat of his pulse. "Activate surgery," she ordered, voice unsteady but firm now. The ER shifted gears instantly, nurses moving fast, forms printing, the room filling with a new kind of energy, hope sharpened by urgency. Dr. Hadi Ahmed, the on-call surgeon, arrived within minutes. He was calm, focused, every movement measured, the kind of presence that made chaos slow down. He leaned over Marcus, speaking softly but clearly. "Mr. Hale, you have a serious internal problem. I need to take you to the operating room right now." Marcus blinked up at him, eyes heavy from pain medication. His voice was faint but steady. "Do what you have to." Dr. Ahmed nodded once. "That's exactly what we'll do." As the team prepared to wheel him out, Javier stepped closer. He placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, grounding him. "You're going to be all right," he said. It wasn't just reassurance, it was a promise. Marcus tried to answer, but all he could manage was a slow exhale, the first hint of relief since he'd walked through those sliding doors hours ago. In the prep bay, while the surgical team adjusted monitors and arranged instruments, an administrative assistant hurried in with a clipboard and a nervous smile. "Mr. Hale, I just need your signature here for consent and financial responsibility. Standard forms." Marcus managed a small nod. His hand trembled slightly as he signed, the pen scratching faintly against the paper. The assistant scanned the form, her eyes pausing for a moment at the bottom. Marcus D. Hale. Below that, a corporate notation, Hale Health Trust, the very foundation that owned a controlling share of St. Eliza Medical Center. The assistant blinked, momentarily unsure what she'd just seen. Then she composed herself, slid the form into the chart, and moved briskly back to the desk. It wasn't her place to question, not yet. But something about that name lingered in her mind, a quiet seed of recognition waiting to bloom. Back in the hallway, Lawrence stood watching as the surgical doors closed around the gurney. The corridor fell silent again, leaving only the hum of machines and the echo of her own heartbeat. For the first time that night, she didn't think about metrics or emails or efficiency. She thought about how easily a single assumption could almost cost a life. And somewhere deep in that silence, between guilt and relief, a small voice rose in her chest, one that sounded a lot like the word she hadn't dared to feel until now: hope. The fluorescent lights in the recovery ward hummed softly, a tired lullaby after hours of chaos. Marcus Hale lay still, a slow rhythm returning to his breathing, color rising faintly back into his face. The machines beside his bed whispered steady proof of survival. Outside the curtain, Dr. Lauren Whitaker stood frozen, her tablet clutched to her chest. She'd rehearsed what she'd say for the past 20 minutes, an apology measured and professional, the kind that met legal standards but not human ones. "I'm sorry your pain wasn't prioritized sooner," she mouthed silently. "We were very busy tonight." Each word tasted hollow. They didn't carry what she felt, they only shielded her from admitting that she'd failed him. The doors at the end of the unit slid open with a quiet hiss. In walked Ethan Lowell, the hospital's chief operating officer, followed by Abigail Monroe, chair of the board, and 2 administrators trailing close behind. They moved with the kind of authority that turned heads without meaning to. Recovery rooms weren't their usual territory. Lauren straightened, puzzled. Executives didn't visit post-op patients unless something extraordinary or catastrophic had happened. "Mr. Hale," Abigail said, her tone warm and deliberate, "we're relieved you're okay." Lauren frowned slightly. "Mr. Hale?" The name sounded familiar, too familiar. She'd seen it on the hospital's letterhead, on fundraising plaques, maybe even on the donor wall near the elevator. Before the thought could form, Ethan's gaze landed on her badge. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in quiet recognition. Marcus stirred, opening his eyes slowly. The fatigue hadn't left him, but there was clarity in his voice. "Thank Dr. Ahmed and Nurse Ortiz," he said. "They saved me." His eyes moved to Lauren. The look wasn't cruel or vengeful. It was steady, the kind that sees everything without raising its voice. "I came here without a title," he said, "because I wanted what every patient gets, attention when they say they're in pain." The room went still. Even the machines seemed to quiet themselves, as if aware of the shift. Ethan cleared his throat. "Dr. Whitaker, just for your awareness," he hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Mr. Hale is the principal of the Hale Health Trust. He's our majority owner." It took a moment for the words to land. Lauren blinked once, twice, and then the air seemed to thin around her. Her mind replayed every second of that first encounter. The impatience in her tone, the disbelief in her questions, the way she'd walked away from his plea. Now the name she dismissed was the very one engraved on the building's foundation. Her mouth went dry. The floor beneath her might as well have tilted. She managed a whisper. I didn't realize." Marcus didn't answer right away. He turned to Javier. "Javier, could you walk us through the timeline? All of it." Javier looked between Marcus and Lauren. His voice was calm but carried weight. He described the intake, the early warning signs, the dismissed vitals, the long wait for imaging, the moment everything changed when the scan came back. His words were clinical, factual, but beneath them was something deeper: integrity. Lauren felt every sentence like a pulse against her ribs. She wanted to interrupt, to defend herself, but the truth didn't need her commentary. It stood on its own. When Javier finished, the silence lingered. Lauren braced for the reprimand, the humiliation she knew was coming. But Marcus did something unexpected. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand consequences. Instead, he told a story. "When I was 15, he said quietly, my mother went to an ER with the same pain I had tonight. Twice she was sent home with antacids. She never made it to the third visit." He took a slow breath. She was 45. Different city, same math. He looked directly at Lauren. His voice carried no venom, only the kind of truth that leaves no space for denial. "I don't want your head, doctor," he said. "I want this place to stop gambling with pain, especially mine, when it looks like this." He gestured to his skin, his tone matter-of-fact, not bitter. Lauren lowered his gaze. Shame and clarity collided inside her. She realized that the greatest failure that night hadn't been medical. It had been human. Ethan nodded solemnly, and Abigail rested a hand on Marcus's arm. "We'll review the protocols," she promised. Marcus gave a small, weary smile. "Do more than review them. Rewrite them." In that moment, the atmosphere shifted, not out of fear, but resolve. The reveal wasn't about power or ownership anymore. It was about a reckoning that could finally lead to change. And as the team filed out, leaving Lauren standing in the soft beeping quiet, she understood that true triumph didn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it came wrapped in humility, when the person you almost failed gave you the chance to do better. 2 weeks later, St. Eliza Medical Center didn't just move on, it changed. The board approved a new emergency policy known across the halls as the Ortiz Rule. If a patient reports severe pain alongside unstable vital signs, nurses have full authority to request immediate imaging. No waiting for approval, no hesitation. Any physician who wanted to override that call had to document a reason and obtain a second opinion. The rule wasn't born out of paperwork. It was born out of a lesson everyone in that building had felt too deeply to forget. Dr. Lauren Whitaker sat in the front row of a new equity and bias workshop. Not the polite surface-level version she'd seen before, the one that came with coffee and forgettable slides, but the real kind. Case simulations, real-time feedback, patient recordings. She had resisted it at first, telling herself she didn't have time, that she already treated everyone the same. But then she listened, and what she heard wasn't accusation, it was reality. She listened to the data, to the voices of families who'd lost someone because their pain had been doubted, to the silence that fills a room when a sigh sounds like judgment. Every statistic came with a heartbeat she could almost hear. Across the hospital, Javier Ortiz found his name on a new plaque. clinical advocate for patient safety. The promotion wasn't ceremonial, it was earned. He'd turned one act of courage into a principle that could save lives. Dr. Hadi Ahmed received a standing ovation at a staff meeting he'd tried to avoid, embarrassed by praise he never sought. And Nurse Denise Carter quietly rewrote the triage intake sheet. Any patient using red words, ripping, tearing, crushing, would now trigger an automatic escalation. It was a small change that made a loud difference. When the wave of policy updates settled, Lauren requested a private meeting with Marcus Hale. No administrators, no cameras, no advisors, just a chair, a table, and two people who had lived through the same night from very different sides. "I failed you," she said. Her voice didn't shake, but it wasn't rehearsed either. "Not because I didn't care, but because I let the system and my own shortcuts make me smaller than I should have been. I'm sorry." Marcus studied her for a moment, the kind of pause that feels like a mirror. Then he said quietly, "I'm not here to make you small, doctor. I'm here to see if you can be big. Help rebuild the system that made it so easy to ignore me." That line, "be big," stayed with her long after he left. Weeks later, news spread of a new initiative, the Hale Initiative, a scholarship and training grant for nurses and residents who showed integrity under pressure. It wasn't announced with a ribbon cutting or a speech. There was a plaque, yes, but no one posed beside it. Because it wasn't about a photo. It was about the next patient whose pain wouldn't be doubted, whose voice wouldn't have to rise to be heard. And on another long night in the ER, when the monitors blinked and the screens glowed with numbers that tried to define human life, Lauren stood outside a curtain. Inside, a man gripped his side, his face twisted in pain, the kind she'd once dismissed. She pulled up a chair beside him. "I hear you," she said softly. And this time, she meant every word. Some stories end with punishment. This one didn't need that. It ended with accountability, with new rules written in humility, and with a belief that would carry through every shift from then on. That accountability is not a wall that stops you. It's a door that lets you change.